Mmm. Wonderful. Let me just finish up with one more bite and then we'll get started. Excuse me. I woke up so late today. Like 11. And it felt like half the day was already gone. Anyway. Okay. Thanks for tuning in. Everybody who's watching. We're in the Lino Kino studio here. This is LKTV. You're watching Taking Cues. My name is Eli. Oh, I gotta get one thing here. Sorry, excuse me. I'll be right back. Okay, all right. I almost forgot my quilting hat. Okay, so taking cues. If this is your first time watching, this is a show where I'm going to talk about quilting. I'm going to talk about quilting as a language, you know. Art is a language we communicate through. But you don't just start out, you know, as an artist. It takes time. It takes practice, and you got to start as a beginner. Really, you shouldn't even think about how to speak with art. It's really just about speaking to yourself, right, from the very beginning. So today's episode is for beginners. In the spirit of that, I really haven't prepared much. I thought that it would be easier for people to follow along if I just do everything from start to finish. You know, like usually I would prepare some pieces and have everything ready so that I can show you all in TV time what would take hours and hours to learn. But no, I don't have anything prepared today. And I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. The phone lines are open. If you want to call in, you certainly can. Maybe wait a little bit before you call in, just right off the bat here. So quilting is an application of sewing first and foremost. Sewing is really the building block. So if you want to start as a beginner quilter, you really need to learn how to sew. So I thought we would take this time to just start from the very basics. This is Sewing 101 moment here. All you need for sewing is a needle, thread, and scissors, and then any material that you want to sew with. So, alright, I got my scissors here. I got a needle. There's one. These days really just blend together, don't they? I worked a little this week. That was nice. Okay, and then I got my thread here. Okay, so scissors, thread, needle, that's it. That's all we need, right? I'm not including materials because, you know, whatever. We're just talking about tools here. Las herramientas. Okay, all right, so we're going to get a piece of thread, let's say about arm's length, okay? All right, maybe now would be a good time to bring in our close-up angle. Would you mind bringing that in? You want to bring that? All right, we got a special close-up angle here now. There we go. There we help you? All right. No need. There we go. There's that. There we go. All right. Okay. Thanks for bearing with us here. Okay, now where did my needle go? The pace of real life is different than the pace of television. It's a totally different way to be. So here we are. This is real life. This is television also. We're gonna start with a square. Okay, we're gonna do some squares here. Now, like I said before, all you need for sewing is a needle, thread, and scissors. Those are essential. Everything else is just to make things comfortable, you know. So here I got my cutting mat. This is a tool that I like a lot. All right, I'm gonna take some of this nice blue fabric and I'm gonna cut out a square. I'm not gonna be very scientific about it here, but I'm gonna give myself a little square. You know what, why don't I go ahead and cut out a few squares here while we're at it, because let's do a square about 3 inches or so. And we're gonna do 3 by 3. Let's check that out. Let's see what that's like. Maybe another 3 by 3 here. Okay, so we're sewing, but we're gonna do a sewing in with the idea that we will be quilting. All right. So I got my 2 pieces here, and we're gonna use something called a seam allowance. Now, what is a seam allowance? A seam allowance is, well, first of all, what is a seam? A seam is the line that you sew, right? It's the line that you sew, so the seam is the joining point between 2 pieces of fabric, right? Now, a seam allowance, this is a little more interesting. So now when we sew, we're sewing in a little bit from the, here I'll zoom in a little bit, you can see. This is pretty basic stuff, so if you know this already, just don't pay attention. All right, so we're gonna sew a line that's gonna go slightly to the inside of these pieces here now, right? Our seam allowance here is anything on this side, right? Because when we're all said and done, this is gonna be our beautiful 2-piece piece of fabric with a seam right down the middle. So our seam allowance is what we allow for the seam. Why do you need a seam allowance? It has to do with the makeup of fabric. Fabric is weaved together, and if we sew a seam that's way too close here, then our seam won't be very strong because it'll pull that weave apart. And that's how you end up with a little ripped pants here or something. All right, and you know what? I'm gonna start over here because I even went, this stuff is, it's a little too second nature for me. I threaded my needle already. I was moving too quick. All right, so we'll get a piece of thread now, arm length, cut that up. Now we got our little needle here, which I am always losing. Okay, now from the get-go, we're changing things up. I don't want you to thread the needle, okay? I want you to needle the thread. Now, what does that mean? Point the thread. Let's see if I can get this right here. Point the thread. I'll focus up a little here. Okay. Point the thread directly at you. This might be a little bit hard to see now, but there you can see the end of my thread here. All right. So we point the thread towards us and we look through the eye of the needle, right? If this is my eye, the camera is my eye, I'm looking through the eye of the needle and I'm needling the thread. I can't, the thread doesn't want to be needled. Sometimes thread doesn't want to be needled. So we come in there and we lick it. Give it a little lick. Come on. You a special thread there. There we go. There we go. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Woo! Almost. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. Now we got a good thing. All right, now here's another special way to tie a knot. So what I like to do is have both of my ends meet up together so they're even. So in essence, I'm sewing with 2 threads, not just one. All right, now we need a knot right here so that our thread doesn't get pulled through when we start the seam. So what I like to do is I'm going to take the needle and I make a cross with the needle on top and the thread on the bottom. And I'm holding the needle with my thumb and my middle finger, right? I got my forefinger here is free. So I make that cross and then I pinch the thread with my forefinger here. And now I take that thread and I go around once and around again. Now I've got this little spirally thing on my needle. I pinch that little doodad. I gotta wrap it again, wrap it twice. Now I pinch that little doodad and I pull the needle through. Okay, I'm still pinching here. Now when I pull it through, I pull it tight and I got myself a little knot. I'll do that again here. This is a little tricky trick I learned from a quilter named Heidi Parks, who I think is great, wonderful. So we make a cross with the needle on top, and I'm holding my needle with my thumb and middle finger. I make a cross. I pinch the thread with my forefinger. I go around twice. Then I pinch that doodad. It's on the needle, wrapped around, and I pull. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Now I'm going to cut that little excess, so I got, look at that beautiful knot. Wonderful knot. All right, so now I got this thread. Let's see, it's about 11 inches, 10 inches. All right, now we're still working with just these 3 tools. Needle, thread, and scissors, okay? After we sew this seam, I'll show you a few more tools that we can use. So, let's sew this first seam here. We've got a notification. Okay, all right. We're moving along. For anybody that's watching, the phone lines are open, but we're gonna give it a little moment till later to call in. Okay, so now I'm gonna sew my seam here. And you remember we talked about the seam allowance. The seam allowance is anything on this side of the seam, right? What's not the seam allowance is what is shown to the world, right? So, when I start a seam, I like to start a seam. I like to look at it like a little box here in the very corner of my seam. And I'm actually going to start the seam. Let's say my seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch. That's like a normal seam allowance. So that means I'm sewing 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the fabric all the way down. But I'm going to start my seam 1/4 of an inch in, right? I'm not going to sew from end to end. I'm going to start here, and I'm actually going to end right here. What does that help us do? It's a little hard to explain. It's more of a good practice kind of thing. So just take my word for it for right now. That's a terrible thing to say as an instructor. Just take my word for it. I don't know how else to do it. You gotta forgive me for that one. All right, so we're starting our seam now. I'm gonna go in here, in this edge, and come up first stitch. I like to pull that first stitch through. Then, I'm gonna come back around to the original hole. Make a little loop here, go for another stitch, right? Pull that through. I also like to pull in the direction that I'm sewing. I think it helps keep this thread from getting tangled, because that's something that can happen. Sometimes if you're pulling in a weird direction, your thread gets pulled through weird, and then you get a whole mess you gotta take care of. So now I've got this little loop here. I'll zoom in even more here so you can see. There we go. That's nice and zoomed in. All right, so I got one loop, one stitch. Now I'm gonna come in here for another couple of stitches. I take my 2 fingers here, I pinch it like that, and then I use my thumb going up and down. A lot of quilting is about finding these ergonomic positions that you like. They can help you do things comfortably and quickly and efficiently, and it's different for everybody. So again, I did 3 stitches there, right? Now when I pull it, I'm going to pull in the direction of my seam to keep that loop that's being pulled through nice and even, nice and straight. All right, so now I'm going to go in here for another few stitches. Pinch it with my 2 fingers here, maybe a little up more, and I'm going to rock. Go in, rock, up and down. Rocking up and down. Yeah. Keeping that 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across. I pull this in the direction of my seam. Okay, we're almost there. How many stitches do we have? That's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 stitches so far. I'd say we need maybe 3 more. Let's see if we can fit 3 more in there. Now remember, we're going to end up right here. Not here. Here. So we're drawing an imaginary line, like a little box right here on the corner. We don't sew past that box. Alright, so we go in, up, in. Okay, I got 2 stitches in. this through. Alright, see now it's kind of funky. Gotta watch out. Alright. Now to finish this off, I got a little bit of thread left. Let's finish this off. I go back to the last stitch where the last stitch went in. Right here. I go down. I go up. I pull, but not all the way. Almost all the way. Now I take this loop here that's left and I pick it up. I pick that up with my needle. And I pull through. What we're doing is we're tying a little knot here. Let's see. Well, not the prettiest knot, but a knot nonetheless. And we're gonna give that a cut. Boom. Now we got a nice little seam here. Now, the quality of a hand-stitched seam. It's vibrant. It's wavy. Right? This is imperceptible to most people. But you take a machine stitched seam and it's straight. You don't see any life in there. This seam, on the other hand, this is vibrant. And if we zoom out, as we do in a whole quilt, you see tens of thousands of stitches in a quilt. Subtly, this translates. It's not the kind of thing you overtly notice, but it translates in some subtle way. You can see the human touch in a hand-stitched seam, right? Okay, so now we know how to sew one seam. I'd like to take a moment to talk about tools. Because there's something you need to know about tools when you're using them. Not all of them are necessary, right? We talked about the 3 essential tools you need for sewing: a thread, a needle, scissors. Let's talk about the non-essential tools, okay? I want to make a list here. Slight adjustment here. Okay. Give you a glimpse into the studio world here. All right. Now I probably got to take this mic over here, right? Set that up. Woo! Okay, a little bright here. Where's my paper here? Okay, I'm a terrible speller, so forgive me if I misspell something. We are going to talk about a hierarchy of implements. Tier 1. Essential. Can you read that?
Yes.
You can read that? Do I need to refocus the camera at all? A little bit?
It's a little out of focus, but I
Okay.
can read it. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Tier 1 essential. Needle. Thread. Scissors. Now really, if I misspell something, don't tell me. Okay, tier 2. Cool to have. Tier 2 would be pins. I almost put that up there. I mean, it's almost essential. Seam ripper. Yeah?
They're actually not able to read it over the center of the transparency. It's too bright.
It's too bright in the center of the transparency. Ah, okay. Then let's readjust here. Let's just do it. Let's say fuck this thing. And we'll just write it on the ground here. I mean on the table here. What's that? Alright. Back over my How's that? Better?
It looks better.
Okay. Good deal. All right. Right on, friends. We are not prepared today. That's on purpose. Ruler. That's your tier 2. All right? Pins, seam ripper, and a ruler. Now let's talk about tier 3. Nice. Tier 3. Template. What do I mean when I say template? They sell plastic templates that you can buy. Those are cool. I've never used them before, but they help people cut curves. I'm talking about any template you use. Now, a piece of cardboard that you cut into a repeatable shape. This template goes with marking chalk. That's also good to have. Iron. And ironing board. Well, cutting mat. Rotary cutter. And that's it. Now, you might notice that there's one tool that's missing from here. That's the only tool I put in tier 4. his sewing machine. They're a pain in the ass. They're cool, they help you along, they help you speed things up. Okay. But they're a pain in the ass though. So if you're just beginning, take a quick photo of that. It's not set in stone. It's just my opinion, man. If you disagree, that's totally cool. You have a chance to call in and voice your opinions, your concerns. Let's go ahead and bring that in. Okay, we're back. Okay. What should we do? What should we quilt? Who's a beginner? Who's got their stuff in front of them? Raise your hand. Okay. Yeah. All right. I think we should do, let's double this, right? Let's make a big square with 4 small squares. How about that? So, take my blue fabric here. I'm gonna cut 2 more squares now. Now, if I really want to be accurate here, we get a template, make a little 3x3 square out of cardboard, and I would lay my fabric out nice and flat. I would line up my template. I would use this little tool called a marking chalk. I'm not going to pick blue because I'm working with blue fabric here, but and I would take my tier 3 tool, my ruler, and I would draw my little square with the marking chalk. Can't really see that, but I don't want to be accurate right now. I just want to sew, you know. So I got 2 squares here. In a minute, after we're done with this, we'll start working with triangles. Okay, so we're gonna sew another seam here. Let's bring in a little thread here. Now, I'm going to throw this gunk away here. And I am going to needle my thread. I don't thread my needle, I needle my thread. Keep trying. There we go. That went a lot easier. Okay, now I line them up here, so I'm sewing with two pieces of thread. I don't have to do that. I could have one tail longer than the other, and this knot trick still works, and that's fine. But I'm just used to doing this, doubling it. For whatever reason, I don't know why exactly. So, I got my needle here. I make the cross. I pinch that cross. I do a couple little loops, and then I pinch that baby, and then I pull through, and boom. A fantastic knot. Ready ready to go. Now I cut a little tail off that. Now I'm ready to start the second seam here. So let's bring in some pins here, shall we? Not essential, but very cool. Very cool to use. So I could pin it along my seam line here in the direction of my seam. Or I can pin it perpendicular to my seam. Whatever feels right. Let's do perpendicular. Now, we're working with a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, so let's start a 1/4 inch down this way. Also a 1/4 inch in this way. So we go in, come back out a little, pull that through. Now I'm going to come back to the beginning here. Now I'll do 2 stitches. And I'm pulling through in the direction of my seam. Now let's do 2 seams. 2 stitches. 3 stitches. 4 stitches. Boom. Look at how nice that is. Pull that through. I think we can pull that pin out. Don't need that anymore. Coming in here. Up, down, up, down. Pull this through. And again, I'm going to stop just short there. The 1/4 inch left to go. Why do I do that? I can't explain it. Sometimes I can't explain it because I just don't want to. I just don't want to explain it yet. Okay, so now I come back in here with a little loop left. I pick the loop up. And there's my seam. Cut that off. Pull that pin out. Okay, now we got a beautiful square here now. Alright. Now we're working with a very simple quilt patch. A square quilt patch. 4 squares. Let's take these. I got my 2 face-up sides facing up. Let's put them face to face, all right? Okay. Now, if I were an accurate person, if I were obsessed with accuracy, I would line it up so my seams line up. Now what does that do? That gives us a nice little cross moment here where we get the 4 corners that all match up in the same little point. I'm going to pretend to be an accurate person right now. So now, how do we get this to line up really nice? I got 2 seams here, face to face, my 2 pieces, lined up here on the edge. Alright, I'm pinching this right here on the seams with another 1/4 inch here, 1/2 inch. I peel this back just 1 layer and I take a look. And I can see there's that little point. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that. And I'm going direction of my seam. I pin it there first, not on either end. I pin it where I want it to match up, right there. Now I pin the end. Now I'm going to pin the beginning. These don't line up here because I didn't measure it at all. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut that so I don't have to think about it. And this is... Alright. Where's my needle? Where are you? I lost her. Okay, let's get another one. That's okay. Pull out another one. Okay. Down, across. Through. Snip it. Okay, now I'm gonna just pretend like I'm just sewing two pieces of fabric together. Not four. Start in a little bit. Alright. I'm moving now. My machine is in the shop right now. Something got messed up with the timing. Sewing machines, most of them, have two threads. A top thread and a bottom thread. The top thread has to get picked up by a little spinning wheel under in the inside of the machine. Mine wasn't getting picked up quite right, so I had to take it to the repairman. This guy named Jack DeSortis in West Philly on 62nd Street. He fixes sewing machines and vacuum cleaners. Okay, so now I'm reaching my seam here. I don't really change anything. I'm just going to keep sewing here. Just keep sewing through now. When I get to this line right here, maybe I'll put my stitches a little closer together, making sure I go all the way through. I'll loop back around and I'll hit that seam line one more time with another little stitch there, just to ensure that my two first seams that I sewed are going to stay together. Continuing on. Keep going now. Quarter-inch all the way, folks. Now pull this last pin out here. Beautiful. Stop a little bit short. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. Okay. Now I don't know why I left that in. Okay. Now. Ta-da! What a nice little corner we got there. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's okay. It's all right. I'm just gonna let's leave that there for a minute. Marvel. Looks nice. Okay. A couple nights ago, I got kind of overwhelmed with the projects I was working on. I didn't want to work on a quilt. I just wanted to be up in my bedroom and work on something small, you know. So I started thinking about making some 3D objects here, all using very simple shapes. All right. I started to make this little thing. Now, how many shapes do we see here? We see triangles, trapezoids, and circles. But let me tell you, this is based on another shape, a volume, called an icosahedron. A guy named Buckminster Fuller talks about triangles. Triangles are a very strong shape. They're the strongest shape that we have, structurally. You can build anything out of triangles. And Buckminster Fuller knew this, and he designed lots of things. He designed buildings and domes and cars and, you know, submersibles, and he was a very smart guy. So let's take this triangle shape now. Let's make a couple of volumes. Now, how much time do we have here? We might not be able to finish this whole thing. It's 7:54. Seems like that's gonna have to be for the next episode. Well, that's okay. I'm gonna make a triangle anyway. Got a little piece of cardboard here. I'm gonna make a little template. A triangle template. How big do I want these triangles to be? Let's say 4 inches. All right. Now, my cutting board, cutting mat here, has a 60-degree angle on it. So, I'm gonna line it up in my corner here, and I draw myself a 60-degree angle. Now, I'm gonna measure 4 inches up that 60-degree angle. Now I'm gonna take that to the first point that I drew, which is 4 inches here. Double check that that's 4 inches also, and look at that. 4. Now I got an equilateral triangle here. My phone number is on the screen. If you feel like calling, you're welcome to now. But don't feel any pressure. If you don't want to, that's fine. Okay, I'm gonna keep working with blue here. All right. Now, when I'm cutting out shapes, I like to cut out all my shapes first here. So, I'm gonna make myself another volume called a tetrahedron. For that I need 4 triangles, that's it. Two, 3, 4. Hello, you're on Taking Cues. Hello?
Hey, hi.
Hi.
This is Angus.
Hi, Angus. How are you?
This program is so awesome. I'm having such a blast.
Thank
watching
you.
And following along.
Are you you're sewing along with us here?
I am sewing along. I have not quilted before, but I've done other sorts of sewing. And I was wondering if you could show again how when we completed our little square, I didn't quite see how you pinned down the seam or like lined them up together and
sure.
Like, did you pin it flat or?
So now you're talking about this square, the flat square that we pieced together, right?
Yeah.
The square that's made up of 4 squares.
Yes.
Okay. So before I sewed this seam here, I had it pinned in the middle here. Pin flat. Pin flat. Yes, you're right, Angus. Like pin flat, like so that the whole of one piece of fabric is touching the whole of the other piece of fabric, surface to surface.
And then, so
I had
so
like.
you've got 2 seams that are going down the middle that you'll have to cross. And so when you cross those, is there a moment where you are sewing, like instead of through 2 pieces of fabric, like do you have one stitch that goes through 4 or even 8 because of both seams that you're crossing?
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's something that I did here that was kind of a break from what I normally do, and I didn't explain it, and I'm sorry for that. So let me zoom in here.
Gotcha.
and see if I can explain this without sewing two more or four more pieces here. Okay, so right here, I'm sewing my two pieced together, two sets of two rectangles, right? And in the middle there, when I get there, I have the seam allowance going to one side, right? What you can do, if you want to, is let's pretend I didn't sew this seam, so that doesn't exist yet. And I've just got my one piece with two rectangles sewed together. Now I can take this and I can split these two. On the underside of my fabric, I've got this seam allowance, the other side there, and I can split that. And you can iron it down, or you can just take your thumb and just crease it. All right? And that is going to make it so that when we sew those two together, like let's say that I do that with both sides here. So now I got the other side, I flipped it over, and I'm going to split those two seam allowances apart, and I'm going to pinch that here. Now if I pinch both of these, so there is a point still where I'm sewing through 4 pieces of fabric instead of 2. So this is a moment where you would want to sort of figure out whether the needle that you're using is appropriate for the fabric that you are sewing with, right?
That's actually I was gonna, if I could ask another question, I was going to ask just what kind of fabric and thread and needle you were using.
I don't think there are probably a lot of quilters out there who would be very specific about the kinds of needles that they use. There's something called sharps, which are just like sort of your everyday needle, like a normal, just like a normal ass needle. Like this would be a sharp. It's really hard to see on the thing, but it's very small and it's very short. I think I just generally look at what the thickness of the fabric, how dense it is, and then I pick sort of the minimum hefty needle that I can use with that fabric, because sometimes over time your needles will start to bend, or they might even break, or it might be so small that and the fabric is so hard to push that it's just really hard to push there, and it'll hurt your fingers over time. And so you might want to pick a little heftier of a needle if you're sewing through like denim or something like velvet or something with a denser weave. And it sort of depends on how many layers of fabric you're going through, but I think you should just buy like a sort of variety pack like this and just try out different ones.
Cool.
Yeah. What are you sewing? What are you working on?
Oh, well, I mean, I just sewed along with
the little
thing
squares.
that you just made.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I did it with just little bits of fabric that I had around.
Nice. That's great. And did you use 2 different colors, or did you use one color?
I just had one color.
Just one color.
I saw that you were doing this earlier today, and I said, that looks like fun.
Yeah. I kind of love the way it looks when you've just got a pattern that's made of just one color. I kind of enjoy that.
Well, I remember you talking to me about a specific quilter that you really like, and now I really like for their white work.
Yeah. Are you talking about
Elizabeth Gurrier? Is that her name?
Yeah. I love Elizabeth Gurrier. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
She's wonderful. But she does something called whole cloth quilting, which I've never done before. But that is like where you actually don't have any piecing involved in that. That's just, you've got one big cloth, and then the artistry comes from the quilting of the top cloth and the batting and the bottom cloth. And she even stuffs it in there and stuffs little things. If you don't know this artist, Elizabeth Gruyere, you should definitely check her out. She's very whimsical. She likes angels a lot.
Yes.
Lots of angels. Do you have any sewing projects in mind that you're thinking about?
Oh, well, I was just curious about this. I don't have any quilting ideas, but I have like some embroidery things I'm working on, and I actually just recently got a sewing machine. So
Nice.
I've just been doing like little alterations on clothes that I have.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Do you like
My
sewing
first-
with a hand?
What?
Do you like sewing by hand or with a machine? Do you have a preference?
Well, I haven't sewn with a machine since like middle school, so it was really exciting to do it again. And but I mean, I love doing embroidery for just I like the repetitive activity of it. And when I'm doing embroidery, I like to do a lot of like big satin stitches and just like filling a lot of space. I think it's really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you?
And it takes forever, and I like that.
I know. Me too. Me too. Whenever I try to do satin stitches on embroidery, though, it always gets twisted up, and I find it hard to keep the thread straight so that my satin stitch comes out nice and uniform. You know.
Yeah, it's difficult.
It's
It's a difficult thing.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I admire embroidery work a lot.
Well, I'll show it to you sometime.
Okay, cool.
Well, I can free up the line for another call or for you to show more of your triangles and talk about them. But
Okay, cool.
I just wanted to say thanks.
Thanks for
And-
calling, Gus.
Yeah.
Nice to talk to you.
All right. Yeah, you too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, thank you, Gus, for calling in. All right. Maybe we'll go for another 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes or so. Okay, so now I've got 2 triangles, and I have sewn 2 triangles together. And you'll notice I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and I've stopped a 1/4 inch in, and I've left this little area here. Now, because we're doing volumes, this is where it gets important, right? This little space here. This is going to be crucial. So, I'm going to lay this face up, and I'm going to take my other triangle, and I will line it up now with my triangles, my edges lining up. Now over here it's going to look funky because I've lost some of that surface area from this other seam. Now it's not on the front, it's on the back. So I'm going to do what I was talking about with Gus on the phone, and I'm going to split this seam allowance here and fold each side back. Alright. Now you can see when I fold that back, these 2 corners match up. Let's see if we can zoom in. It's very minute stuff we're talking about here, but so I've got these 2 corners, they're lined up, and this edge is lined up all the way to here where I've got my seam, and my seam allowances on the other side are split. So one is going back this way, the other is going this way. Now we flip it over. If I take another 1/4 inch seam allowance and I'm going to sew now this seam here. Let's pin that. Let's see what it looks like. Quarter inch in. I'm going to peel that back. Now all of a sudden our converging point is right here. It's not at the edge of the triangle. It's not at the corner of the triangle. It's in a little bit because we've got that seam allowance there. So let's sew that seam. And I'm still starting in a little bit here, leaving some edge. Pull that seam out. I mean that pin. Up and down, up and down. Sewing this nice seam. Now I'm pinching here so I don't lose that, but I'm going to go ahead and pull that pin out, and I'm just pinching it, right, so it's not moving. I'm going to go in and out, under and out. Now here's something that I'm doing. I'm going to catch the seam allowance from the piece that I already stitched here. This is a little hard to show to the camera. This is the underside as I'm stitching. I catch this seam allowance here. Maybe it's easier once I've stitched it here. Now check that out. See how I caught it right there? I'm pulling that back and stitching it back so that my seam allowance can rest like this. Split and laid flat, not like this, like that. What does that do? It helps to flatten things out so that if I were going to quilt this, my pieced top quilt would lay nice and flat on the batting. So now I've gone not to the edge, but a 1/4 inch in. That's where I'm going to stop. I'm going to loop back around, pull that almost through, pick up that little loop there. Now, there we go. Alright, so now we've got these 3 triangles sewn together. Now we're ready to make this, almost ready to make this 3-dimensional, right? What we're going to do is, I'm going to cut the tips of these corners here. Alright. Okay. So, we've got a trapezoid here now, made of 3 triangles. Let's take this edge and this edge, And I'm going to sew that seam. Make sure that's long enough. Give me a little loop. Pull that through. Okay, now, still starting in a little bit. Basically, I'm just going to pick up that seam where this one left off, so start just inside of that. Going through just 2 pieces of fabric here, not 3, just 2. Stop 1/4 of an inch here. What's going on there? Pull that out a little. Okay, loop back around. Now, pick up that little loop. And there we go. Alright, now what do we have here? A container. Our first volume. But we're going to flip this inside out. Take a little Sharpie here, push this out a little bit. There we go. Our first volume. It's not done yet. Let's flip it back inside out. So, how do we do this last triangle? This is kind of a tricky point. I want to sew it in one thread, almost all the way around. So I'm going to pin that whole thing. One pin on each side. All right. Okay. I got a thread now. Alright, this one's about the length of my arm here. So now when I sew this, so here we have our 3 pieces connected on all 3 sides. Rather, 3 pieces, each of them connected on both sides to each other. This is a tetrahedron. Now we've got our bottom piece, or our 4th piece, lined up and pinned. So now we want this whole thing to be inside out, but we've got to sew it together outside in. want it to be outside out. You've got to sew it together inside out. Okay, I'm going to start. Let's say we're going to go in the direction of the pins. All right. So I'm starting here. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to sew from here up. Sorry, you can't see that. From here up to this corner. And then right there is going to be my corner. I'll sew down here. I'll hit that corner. I'll sew there, get that corner, and then sew to about there. And then this open space here, that's what I'm going to use to open it up and flip the whole thing inside out. And I'll also use that to stuff it with something. I don't quite know what yet. So I'm going to start this going towards the corner. And when I get to that corner, I just change the angle just a little bit. And then I pivot. And I sew this seam. Now, since I'm pinching this, I can go ahead and pull this pin out. Just continue sewing this seam here. So now with 3 triangles, I can make a tetrahedron, 4 triangles. Let's say I want to make an icosahedron. I think we need 20 triangles for that. So we would do the same thing that we've just done, except instead of lining up 3 triangles and then sewing the ends together, we would line up 5 triangles. All with the points facing the same direction, so like a pinwheel of 5 triangles. Okay, now we're here at this other corner. I'm going to loop around, picking up all 3 layers there. So I am picking up a little bit of that. Let's pick up a little less. Just barely picking up all 3. Okay. And we pivot. Here we are. I'm going to sew this seam now. People who make clothes know all about making flat things into 3D things. There's sort of a clairvoyance to it. This is the simplest way. Now maybe someone can call in and tell me how you start to make a pattern for something like a shirt or a teddy bear or something, or a tennis ball. Alright, now we're here, we're almost at this last corner. I'm going to hit that corner, adjust the angle, and pull that through. Okay, now remember I said I was going to stop right here. I'm going to stick to it. I'll stop right there. So one more stitch and loop back around, and there we go. Pick up that loop. Boom. Now I'm cutting it. Okay, so what do we have? An inside out icosahedron, alright? This seam goes boink, 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 boink. So we have a hole here. Let's flip it inside out. Or let's flip it right side out now. Okay. What is this? Maybe it's a cat toy. If you tie a string to it. Maybe it's an adult toy. A non-sexual adult toy. Maybe you could fill it with beans and put it in the microwave and then use it as like a heating pad for your aches, your adult aches and pains. Maybe you can soothe your special loved one with a bean-filled tetrahedron. I don't know. That's for you to decide. So, we have now, this is almost a tetrahedron. It's kind of a weird little shape here. I want to... What?
Do you cook the beans?
You don't cook the beans, no. I mean, you would leave the beans uncooked. You know, like one of those things that you put on your aches and pains, you know? I don't think it's actually beans in there.
I know what you mean.
I just like the way that sounds like it would feel. You could cook the beans, though. You could. You could cook the beans if you want. Okay. I'm running out of words here. I'm also wholly unprepared. I don't have anything to stuff this with. I don't have any beans. Let's not stuff it then. All right. Now I'm kind of winging it here. Okay, so my icosahedron has 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges. This last edge, the 6th edge. I need to make this seam allowance here. So, how do I do that? I fold that in, and I pin that. And I take my other part of that edge, I fold that in, and I pin that. Now I've got these messy things here. I'm gonna peel this 3rd layer and I'll fold that in. Now I've got a nice corner here. What do I do? I pin that. Now, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm folding all 3 of my edges in. And I'm going to pin that. we're gonna end with a whip stitch. So, here's a little trick. I got a knot on the end of this. Everything is the outside, right? There's no underside now. It's all just the show side. So where do I hide my knot? Well, I start anywhere, right? I start out in the middle of the triangle here, or off to the side. I start anywhere, it doesn't matter. Just far away from where I want the seam to start. And I come out right in my corner here. So start it here and come out in my corner here. Now I pull that. Now I got my knot here, but I'm just gonna pull that, and look at that. My knot disappears. So now I've got my thread coming out here through the knot. So a whip stitch, this is going to be visible, but that's okay. I'm just going in little loops along the outside here, like little sutures. If I had something to stuff this with, I would do this about halfway through this seam, but I didn't think about it. I didn't prepare. You could stuff it with fabric. I could cut up a ton of little pieces of fabric and stuff it with that. Cut up my socks with the holes in them. All right. Almost had a little knot there. Okay. Having a little trouble there. Alright, now to finish this off, do one more whip stitch. Then I'm going to tie a little knot. Now I gotta just kind of be normal here. And tie a normal little knot. And I'm gonna end this knot, pull it so that it ties tight about 1/4 of an inch from the workpiece here, right about there. So there's my knot right here, and I'm gonna go in like I'm making another whip stitch, but I'm gonna come out all the way over here, right in the middle of my piece. stuffed, it would be easier to do this, but it's not. So I'm gonna pull till that knot comes through there. Do you hear that little click? Now I can just cut this little piece. Cut it right there next to the fabric. And that just disappears. And here we have it. A fancy little tetrahedron. Strong shape. Very strong shape. Structurally strong. Okay. I like doing beginner stuff. I think it's a nice way to spend time. If I start one of these little volumes, I can't stop in the middle. I have to finish it. That's how I end up staying up so late. Waking up so late. All right. I would say that sums it up tonight on taking cues. Thank you very much, those of you who are still here. And good night.